My name is Ravesi-Weinstein. I'm an author, speaker, and mental health advocate from Massachusetts. And during the day, I'm a high school assistant principal. Today I want to talk to you about how to advocate for our students with anxiety. Look, mental illness has existed since, well, we've existed. But only until recently have we given enough of a voice to mental illness to start removing the stigma associated with it. And that's not to say that we're there yet. I could give you a rundown of why professionally I can talk to you about anxiety, but let's face it, I'd rather you know who I am and why mental health advocacy has become my passion project. If you ask any one of my friends or colleagues about me, they'll probably tell you, Christine, she's driven, intense, and way too hard on herself. They'd probably also tell you that no matter how much experience I have with something, if I'm doing it, I expect perfection. Well, nobody's perfect, but if there is one thing I know I do well, it's sharing my story, which is where I'll begin. So I was a student in your class with anxiety. I went undiagnosed until 23. I had many classic symptoms of the illness. But before I continue, I want to be clear here. Not all sufferers of anxiety have the same symptoms. This is what makes it so difficult to know if a student is anxious or if there's something else going on. Some people might show obvious emotions, tears, anger, avoidance, but others might suffer in silence. And that's who I was. From stomach aches to not making valuable, deep connections with my peers to spending hours at night just trying to do my work perfectly. I was suffering from many symptoms of anxiety. I mean, I couldn't even cross out in my notebooks, my anxiety was so bad. But to my teachers, I was just a good, conscientious student. My intensity was a drive to succeed. There's always a lot of competition at the top, right? That's what I thought too. But as I got older and eventually reached graduate school, I realized my symptoms were much more than just a drive to succeed. In fact, I started to suffer more as I got older. I had fears of leaving the house, I worried about upsetting others, I constantly apologized for everything. Sorry if I'm just rambling. By then, I didn't even have any coping skills to manage what it was I was feeling. But if you want to talk about silver linings, the beginning of my journey towards mental wellness coincided with my career as an educator. As I became more attuned and on high alert with my own illness, I started to see it in my students too. Between my experience, my time in the classroom, and now in my role with student interventions as an administrator, I've worked to share the strategies I've learned with educators all over the world to speak for those students who may not yet be able to speak for themselves. My first strategy to help support students with anxiety in your classrooms is to meet your students where they are. There was a lot about school and about life now, to be frank, that was very anxiety-inducing for me. Making presentations, seeing myself on video, oh my God, I couldn't even stand the sound of my own voice. None of those things were things that I could do without hours or even days of angst leading up to them. Thankfully for me, because as my kids tell me all the time, I'm old, recordings were very seldom part of my education. But today, with tech ed tools and remote learning, students are being asked to engage in digital presentations all the time. This can be a huge trigger for kids, so we gotta meet them where they are. If a student's afraid to be on video, let them work behind the camera. If someone doesn't like the sound of their own voice, maybe asking them to record a project isn't the best first step for them. Think about people who climb Mount Everest. They don't arrive at base camp one day and then summit the next. It would literally kill them. Guides have to meet climbers where they are. They start the process of acclimatization, which takes weeks to complete. They take hikes up to additional base camps higher on the mountain and come back as part of the process. Sure, the end goal is to summit, but it doesn't happen right away. Whether a student suffers from anxiety or not, the goals are the same. It's the process that's different. It's like hiking Mount Everest. There gotta be checkpoints along the way. Which brings me to my second strategy. Set small, attainable goals for your students. Look, I'm the most impatient person that I know. When I have a task to complete, I just want to finish it. But that's why I experienced so much anxiety in the first place. I start playing the game of what ifs. What if I can't do this? What if the product is crap? What if I finish last? What if I get sick before I'm even done? What if I'm nearly finished and I misplace or I lose everything I've already done? But the conclusion I always end up arriving at is that if I break up the job into smaller pieces, it's not only going to be more successful, it'll probably be a less emotionally painful process overall. For example, when I'm running, it isn't, I still have 6 miles to go, at least not all the time. It's, I can run to the next driveway and then I'll reassess where I'm at. And it can't be any different in the classroom if a student has an entire essay to write, and let's face it, not many of us look forward to 5-paragraph essays. Pare down the work and have the students start with 3 to 5 sentences, an introduction. But don't just assign the smaller goal and leave the students on their own. Check in on them, look over the work, give feedback. If you do this at various points throughout the assignment, you make grading the final project that much easier. You've already graded it numerous times already. And isn't that real learning anyway? What should you do if students aren't meeting the small attainable goals or checkpoints that you've established? Strategy 3, ask questions. We've all heard that saying, don't assume, it makes a out of you and me. But no offense, I'm not really worried about you right now. I'm worried about your students. When you make an assumption instead of asking a question, you run the risk of shutting your students with anxiety down completely. You've created a narrative in their mind that supplements the voice already in their head. I never do anything right, I'm not good enough, I knew my teacher hated me. Assumptions are the first ticket to being an enemy to your students with anxiety. Instead of assuming why a student is struggling or not meeting goals, ask. Even if the student doesn't open up to you at first, the more you ask, the more you show you care, and eventually that student is likely to see you as someone they can safely share with. Assumptions create labels, and trust me, every student with anxiety has already given themselves enough labels. They don't need any more. They got you. Another thing about asking questions is it allows you to show authenticity. Strategy 4, be authentic. Authenticity isn't about you being you and the heck with the system. Authenticity is about being human, showing compassion, being empathetic, and showing students you can be part of any system or structure in the world. They're your students and you're a teacher, but before either of those two things, you're people first. People are social. We like to make connections, to have jumping off points so that we can build positive relationships with each other. Doing this for your students will make them feel comfortable in your class. Anxiety is all about control. It's hard for students with anxiety to relinquish control to anybody. So you tell me what's more likely. A student giving control to a teacher that they don't know or believe that they can trust, or a student giving control to a teacher who they connect with and feel comfortable being around. Connection is authentic. Learning should be fun. Let the content be the means through which you build positive relationships with your students. Let those relationships be driven by empathy, care, and most importantly, laughter. If you can't laugh in a classroom, who the heck wants to be there? I don't. It's really difficult to stop and move on from something when you have anxiety. You perseverate over and over about the smallest things. A glance, a delay in a text, a single math problem. Control and perfection become an obsession. And although it might be obvious to someone who isn't suffering from anxiety that a simple break might do the trick, it's not so obvious for those who do have anxiety. In fact, sometimes these situations can ignite panic attacks, depending on the severity of the illness. This is where you come in. Educators need to help advocate for students with anxiety by encouraging them to press reset. The 5th strategy I'm sharing with you. Pressing reset is very difficult for students with anxiety because they think it means they've failed. But pressing reset isn't a sign of failure. It's exactly the opposite. It's a sign of your commitment to success. Pressing reset shows strength, composure, maturity, control. You won't back down. You won't let your anxiety win. You will continue to fight on your terms. But if you're going to help students press reset, you have to have something for them to engage in that will positively impact their mindset. If you tell them just to take a break and press reset, and they just sit there, they're likely to get more frustrated and mad. An unoccupied mind is a dangerous mind in the world of anxiety. So try something like this. Give them a break that involves movement. Go for a walk with them. Take them out in the hall and do some exercises with them. Some squats, some toe touches, some jumping jacks. It doesn't need to be very complicated. The body was designed to move, so move. One of the things I loved to do with my students when I was in the classroom was take 5 minutes and play a game of four corners with them. They'd get up, move, laugh, argue, get competitive, and then be better for it once we sat back down and returned to our work. Another idea for pressing reset is a creativity corner. Set up an area for students that isn't a timeout area for negative behavior, but rather a timeout area for self-advocating. Set up coloring, Legos, or other manipulatives. Students can work there for 5 to 10 minutes to relax their minds and refocus or press reset. Have a timer there that they can set so that they don't get too lost in what they're doing. One of my go-to coping strategies is to build Legos and blocks with my kids. Using my hands and being creative occupies a part of my mind where the anxiety doesn't sit. It lets me have a break from my anxiety. Creativity corners can help students regain control over their emotions and engage back in a lesson when they're ready. Anxiety isn't a choice. Students aren't sitting there thinking, this life thing is just way too easy. You know what I need? I need an obstacle. I'm gonna make a voice in my head that follows me everywhere and is constantly telling me I'm not good enough. And it's also gonna constantly remind me of all the things that could possibly go wrong, just so life is a little less easy. Yeah, that sounds like what I want. Trust me, anxiety isn't a turn it on, turn it off kind of thing. If small talk were small pickings for me, my world would be so much less sweaty and awkward. Anxiety isn't going away. Mental illness isn't going away. As a matter of fact, in today's world, they only stand to get worse. As educators, it's up to us to start guiding our students to find the coping skills they'll need to manage their illnesses and be successful in not just academia, but in the adult lives they'll soon be living. I'm Ravesi-Weinstein. Thanks for listening today. Remember, advocating for students with anxiety may feel uncomfortable. It may be a risk, but risks are worth taking if you only think to yourself, what if it turns out right? Not what if it goes wrong. Take care.